COMELEC is now breaking its silence after months of scrutiny over campaign donations. Good morning, I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno, and this is At the Forefront. When the referee of our democracy starts questioning the players and the sponsors behind them, something has shifted. Contractors who build public infrastructure are under fire anew for possibly building political careers. What's the next step after COMELEC's disclosure against the 24 companies and still counting? Will the filing of cases against senators and congressmen implicated be next? We have with us the chairman of the Commission on Elections, Chairman George Garcia. Good morning, Chairman George.
Good morning, Atty. Karen. Sa mga kababayan natin, magandang umaga po.
Chairman George, how did COMELEC uncover the network of possible illegal campaign donations from 24 government contractors?
Well, the best source, of course, of evidence will always be the statement of contributions and expenditures under the law. Each and every candidate, political parties, and party lists will have to submit their SOSE at least 30 days after the conduct of the election. So, for the purpose of our investigation, we made it a point to proceed first with the 2022 elections because the prescriptive period of what we call as election offense cases is actually 5 years. And so we have to start with 22 so that it will not expire by 2027.
Yeah, habulin nyo muna yun at least,
opo.
yes.
And then after that po, the 2025, total 2030 naman po. So we conducted a motu proprio investigation. Nobody compelled us simply because naging napakainit po kasi, Atty. Karen, ng issue. Hindi kami papayag na masisisi ang COMELEC why we are not lifting a finger. And so we started motu proprio with 2022 and we found out that there were at least 55 contractors na nagbigay ng donation, contributions sa political parties, candidates, or party lists. And of course, while we are waiting for the confirmation of the DPWH as to whether these 55 are actually public works contractors, sinimulan na lang din namin yung 2025. And as you correctly pointed out, as of yesterday, we already determined 24 possible public works contractors who contributed sa mga kandidato, political parties, and party lists.
And when you say illegal, Chairman George, ito po yung nasa Section 95C of the Omnibus Election Code.
Yes,
Kaya
Atty.
you're
Karen.
zeroing in dun sa public works contractors.
You are right, Atty. Karen, under the Omnibus Election Code, which is actually a 1985, a medyo old Jurassic law na, but still applicable as of this time. Under Section 95, letter C, it is prohibited for a natural or juridical person to make donations, contributions to candidates, political parties, and party lists, especially if they have existing contracts or contracts with the government, whether public works or a service contractor. But we have to take note that Section 95, ang title po niyan is Prohibited Contribution. Meaning, isa lang po yun sa mga prohibited contributors under Section 95. Meron din po doon, bawal mag-donate ang isang mining company. Bawal mag-donate ang companies with existing yung contracts with the government, like yung nakakatanggap din sila ng mga benefits from the government, katulad ng franchises. So, bawal din. Pero ang inuna po muna namin, Atty. Karen, we started first with the public works contractors.
Okay. When you say inuna nyo po yun at napakainit ng issue, ang nag-compel ba sa inyo na mag-motu proprio investigation was the flood control mess? Kasi naalala ko po, the first time ko narinig yung issue ng illegal campaign donations was after the press conference of then Senate President Chis Escudero admitting na nag-donate sa kanya si Lawrence Lubiano.
I'll be very honest po, Atty. Karen. What compelled the COMELEC was the admission. When it was admitted by Mr. Lubiano that he contributed 30 million pesos to the campaign, to organization of then candidate Senator Chis Escudero. And then of course, the day after that, nagkaroon ng confirmation si Senator Chis Escudero as regards the receipt of the 30 million pesos. So doon nagsimula na ang COMELEC, aside from the fact na naging napakainit ang issue ng flood control projects, sinabi natin, supposedly po kasi under this SOSE law, the COMELEC cannot motu proprio conduct investigation. There should be somebody who should be filing the proper case. Yung motu proprio ng COMELEC can only be doon sa excess campaign, doon sa mga excess expenses. And then yung mga erroneous submission ng SOSE. Yan, pwede kami mag-motu proprio. Pero yung dito, ma'am, like parang filing ng candidacy, hindi kami pwede mag-motu proprio. But however, in this particular instance, we conducted motu proprio and we found out that indeed there were 55 contractors who contributed, and do sa 55 na yun, sa 2022, meron doon 6 na candidates for senators, may candidate for president, vice president, may 2 candidate, 3 candidates for governors, 2 candidates for vice governors, and then at least 3 candidates for congressmen, at may mga candidates din pa sa party list.
Are you going to release that list po at
Yes,
some
ma'am.
point? Yung mga
Definitely.
contractors and kanino dinonate?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely, Attorney Carrie, we're going to release the list after the confirmation by the DPWH, because it's really so unfair at this point. We realize that to release immediately the names of these contractors, of course, the corresponding candidates who received the donation, simply because bakit namin i-release kung ang confirmation pala ni DP hindi naman pala nangungontrata sa gobyerno. May example po doon, meron doon isang donor, isang contributor, isang contractor, ang pangalan ng company niya, glass and aluminum supplier. So mukha namang hindi naman po siya contractor. But tingnan natin, meron naman po doon, mataas yung position na binigyan niya, siya ay isang realty corporation. Alam natin, the realty corporation may not necessarily be a public works contractor. But we want a confirmation from the DPWH. Meron ba silang kontrata prior to the filing of the candidacy, during the filing of the candidacy, or immediately after the election?
Immediately after is counted.
Yes,
That's still
po.
a prohibited donation.
Because wala naman, Attorney Karen, na nakalagay sa batas. Ang sabi, basta must be a government contractor or contractor of public works or a service contractor.
And kaya ito po yung reason bakit kayo nakikipag-coordinate with DPWH to get that confirmation. They're
Yes.
checking against the records.
And this is what we call now as case build-up. We have to build the cases simply because we will be filing criminal cases. The very nature of our investigation is to zero in under Section 263 to 64 of the Omnibus Election Code based on an election offense. Punishable by 1 to 6 years imprisonment. Hindi po ito ground to disqualify, to remove, because that is no longer our jurisdiction. If we are going to remove, then it should either be the Senate as an institution, the House of Representatives, meron naman silang ethics committee, or the Office of the Ombudsman, or doon sa kanyang administrative function or power, or kaya naman ang DILG, doon sa mga local officials. Ours is only for purposes of determining culpability as to whether there is really an election offense committed, punishable by 1 to 6 years imprisonment, and in case of conviction by final judgment, perpetual disqualification to hold public office.
But Chairman George, so you're saying that even if you cannot remove already an elected official from their office, you may still put them in prison based on the possible penalties under the election code?
You are right, Atty. Carrie. In fact, this is the first time in the history of our election that the COMELEC or even the public had known about the existence of Section 95. At least dun man lang sa letter C. And it's also the first time that the COMELEC had used this provision to look for the culpability or liability of anybody.
With respect to Senator Cheese Escudero, he had until around, I think, October 13 to respond to the show cause order of COMELEC. Nag-reply na po ba siya?
Yes, Atty. Karen, he already filed through his counsel the comment answer to the allegation. And in fact, prior to that, Mr. Lubiano likewise, through his counsel, filed before the Commission on Election his defense as to why they should not be charged under Section 95C of the Omnibus Election Code.
Chairman George, under the law, we recognize that an individual, a person, can have a separate legal personality from the corporation. So tama po ba yung defense ni Senator Cheese that the donation came from Lawrence Lubiano as an individual and not from the construction company or contractor?
Attorney Karen, that I think is the crux really of the controversy. It's not factual. And that's the reason why first we proceeded with the investigation of Senator Cheese, including Mr. Lubiano. Hindi na namin hinintay yung DPWH, kasama sa 55 dapat sila. Hindi na namin hinintay because there was already an admission. So why I need to prove that Mr. Lubiano is the owner of a government contractor. But at the same time, there was this denial on their part, especially on the part of respondent senator, that ang alam niya, personal capacity yung pagbibigay because doon sa SOSE, kahit doon sa Certificate of Donation, Affidavit of Donation, hindi niya nilagay kung na siya ay presidente, may-ari ng company.
Yeah.
Nilagay niya as a person. So meaning to say, as far as Senator Cheese daw is concerned, based on his defense, that I do not have any knowledge that na siya ay nagbibigay as the president or owner of that corporation. But nagbibigay siya in his personal capacity.
Yeah.
That is now a matter for the commission to decide and to interpret whether indeed Section 95C will admit of certain exemptions. Meaning when you say natural or juridical person, will the natural person, which refers to us, exclude somebody who will be making a donation in his personal capacity?
Yeah, interesting. So that's why you can't explain fully, because this is a pending case. But
Yes.
it's going to be interesting because even in our law, we have that doctrine of piercing the corporate veil.
That's
so
right.
under certain circumstances, pwede mo i-consider na iisa yung tao at yung corporation.
And in fact, kapag nag-go beyond the law ang isang corporation, we can go after the officers
Yeah, the
because
individuals.
ultra-virus acts yung ginawa po nila.
Yeah, interesting. Sige po. So we will wait for your update on that. Well, si Sunwest Corporation, this is one of the top government contractors, is linked to Congressman Zaldico or former Congressman Zaldico. How will we improve the way we allow candidates to run? Because a lot of people will say, oh, bawal na bawal yan. Paano nakatakbo si Zaldico? But I understand that based on our laws, divestment is recognized as a way to qualify for being a candidate and eventually being elected. Pero can we check na talagang wala ng beneficial interest itong mga nagiging elected officials sa kanilang mga contractor companies?
Mukha pong based on our existing laws, even on the Constitution, the investment will only happen after the election, before assumption to office. Usually, yan po yung nangyayari. But prior to, once you are still, when you are still a candidate, there is no constitutional provision that no person who is a contractor can run for public office. Otherwise, that may be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Perhaps, this is an eye-opener now, baka pwede magkaroon ng legislation, but the COMELEC po kasi cannot add something to what is not prescribed in the Constitution or in our existing laws. Napaka-basic lang po yung requirement sa Constitution.
Able to read and write?
Yes, Article 6, Section 4, number 1 lang po, able to read and write, must be a resident of the Philippines for at least 1 year, must be a resident of the place for at least 6 months, must be at least 25 years of age, and of course, must be a registered voter. Yan lang po yung basic qualification. In fact, there was one case whereby the Supreme Court set aside the decision of the COMELEC because the COMELEC added one qualification which was at that time in 2015 na dapat hindi drug addict. Sabi ng Supreme Court in Dangerous Drugs Board versus the Commission on Election, and likewise in Pimentel versus the COMELEC, said that the COMELEC cannot add qualification to what is not prescribed by the Constitution or existing law. So, yan po yung problem and predicament ng COMELEC. We're hoping that our people will be able to understand, tali po yung kamay ni Commission, whatever is the law that will be applicable, we cannot add something to what is not there.
Well, recently, the DOJ announced that about 67 members of the House, ibig sabihin mga around 67 congressmen, have proven interest in construction firms. So, based on your explanation, mukhang tama po talaga kayo. Ma-frustrate ang mga tao na malaman na maraming mga nasa Congress ay mga contractors din or may interest sa mga contractor companies. Pero hindi nyo naman sila pwedeng i-disqualify.
Yes po. Baka Atty. Karen, baka yun ang dahilan kung bakit konti lang yung sa SOSE, yung meron donation from contractors. Kasi contractor na sila yung iba.
Oo,
okay,
yes.
You cannot donate for yourself. So, siyempre, hindi na nila i-report yun. Siguro nga, mga 2-3 lang yung po yung mga may donation from contractors. At saka apart from the fact that there's another loophole. And what is that? Yun yung sinasabi namin noon pa, na baguhin na yung batas on the election spending. Try to imagine 3 pesos per registered voter. So if you're a candidate for congressman, you have 200,000 voting population. You're allowed to spend 3 pesos only per registered voter if you are a candidate with political party. Kapag ka-independent candidate naman, 5 pesos per registered voter. So 600,000 pesos lang during the 45-day period of the campaign ang pwede mong gastusin. And siyempre, ba't naman hihingi ka pa sa contractor kung kaya mo naman yung 600,000 pesos?
Yeah. And Chairman George, itong issue with contractors being congressmen themselves. Clear conflict of interest. But kailangan ng batas para baguhin itong sistema na to?
Only as far as the issue of disqualification of being a possible candidate. But after winning the election, then they will have to divest. Otherwise, they will violate another provision of the Constitution which will prohibit them from engaging directly with with the government or a contrary interest with that of the government. So yun, wala na po tayong problem doon after the election. But prior to the election, perhaps Congress or there should be a law to properly guide the commission election simply because walang ground talaga. Hindi nga natin pwedeng sabihin na dapat yung kakandidato must be a holder of a PhD degree.
So ang kailangan bang baguhin dito ay constitution?
Let's try if a law can be passed, especially if nobody will question the constitutionality of a particular law.
Yeah,
So,
especially since we've seen the effects, the pernicious effects of this kind of system that we have.
yeah, I think it will pass the issue of constitutionality kung sakasakali naman po na may magpasa ng ganyang batas.
Well, Chairman George, since pinag-uusapan na natin ang mga contractors, how did the Diskaya firm, St. Timothy Construction, become part of the Miro Systems Consortium that won the 18 billion pesos 2025 election automation deal?
Yeah.
But before you answer this question, we'll have to take a short break. At the forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the forefront. Chairman George, how did the Diskaya firm, St. Timothy Construction, become part of the Miro Systems Consortium that won the 18 billion peso automation deal for the 2025 elections?
When I was a guest before during the first airing of this program,
Yes.
I told you before that, Attorney Karen, number one, for purposes of landing into a contract or winning a contract in the commission election, perhaps in other government agencies, yung kasing tinatawag na joint venture can be done after the procurement. So yung pong St. Timothy, hindi po yung St. Gerald, yung St. Timothy, ay part po siya ng isang consortium, ng isang joint venture. Ang kanyang participation yung tinatawag na NFCC, Net Financial Contracting Capacity, meaning show money. Sa kanya yung show money. In fact, during the hearing of the Senate, we were asked, bakit kasama ang isang construction firm? Anong ginagawa ng isang construction firm dyan sa isang kontrata involving automation of the election? Of course, later on, a senator said, ay, tama, sila lang naman na may pera. Sila yung may show money sa ganyan. So when you say NFCC, the NFCC of a 19 billion peso contract is more or less 9 billion. So you must be able to show that you have an existing contract or contracts na may amount to about 9 billion. So, yung mismong joint venture, they were able to show na yung NFCC nila is more or less 9 billion pesos. Ang pinakita mga projects ay yung projects ng St. Timothy at that time, 133 projects. Of course, later on, we compelled them to withdraw from the consortium, from the joint venture before the filing of the candidacies because we learned at that time that the wife will be filing her candidacy as mayor of Pasig and we said that we will not allow that.
This was Sarah Diskaya at
Yes,
that time,
Atty.
running
Karen.
for mayor of
Yes,
Pasig.
and so before the filing of the candidacy, they withdrew from the joint venture, and one of the two remaining joint venture partners assumed the liability, the obligation of the St. Timothy. At that time, meron na sila ngayon, may kakayanan na sila na magpakita ng NFC. So they submitted a new NFCC, this time less or without the presence of St. Timothy.
Do you feel that meron po tayong dapat baguhin sa mga requirements, considering that in this case, you have a construction firm being part of a consortium, kahit na wala naman silang track record sa elections.
Yes.
Whereas, if you have a foreign company, then baka naman hindi talaga magka-qualify sila dun sa NFCC na required dito sa Pilipinas.
Yung NFCC kasi dapat local, but immediately after the conduct of the conduct of the procurement and then before the election, there was this bill. I think it was authored by, at that time, Senator Sani Angara, yung ating bagong Procurement Act, amending Republic Act 9184. Now it's Republic Act 12009, which is the new Procurement Act. This time, because the COMELEC was one of the resource persons, this time, ang nilagay na lang, nobody can participate in COMELEC procurement of any election equipments or paraphernalia or whatever, if this company does not have any election-related experience.
Okay, so
ngayon
binago,
kasama na po,
mas
binago
rational
na.
na po.
Opo.
But Chairman George, in hindsight, kasi that time wala namang issue with the Discayas before this whole flood control controversy blew up. Are you, to a certain extent, thankful na naging ganun yung outcome na natanggal sa consortium ng St. Timothy Construction? Because the Miru systems, it seems like their performance was, it turned out very well for the 2025 elections. Pero kung meron tayong connection sa mga Diskaya na ngayon nagiging part ng investigation sa flood control, matitate kaya yung reputation ng 2025 elections or i-question yung integrity noon just because merong part ng contractor sa consortium?
Perhaps, Atty. Karen, yes, but I do not want to speculate.
Yeah.
But siguro nga blessing na rin yung lahat ng bagay na nangyari. And at least we were able to review the law. Number two, we'll be very, very careful now when we conduct the new procurement for the 2028 elections. And surely, wala na mga construction firms na pwede makapasok ngayon sa kontrata sa COMELEC kasi nga po hindi na sila pwede because wala silang election-related experience because of the new law. So, it's madaming mga pagkakataon na yung isang circumstance, isang pangyayari will open a lot of doors on the part of the Commission or even other government agencies.
Yeah,
so we'll just consider
meaningful reforms.
Meaningful reforms, and masaya na lang kami, naging maayos ang results, and at the same time, tinanggap ng mga kababayan natin yung results na ito.
Well, Chairman George, now that na-discovery na rin ng mga kandidato na meron palang Section 95C of the Omnibus Election Code, yung tungkol dun sa mga prohibited campaign donations, are you worried na baka hindi na accurate ang i-declare nila sa SOSE nila for the 2028 elections?
In fact, we are going to ask din a question. Despite the fact na ngayon, merong ng ganyan, pwede, o nakakalusot yung iba, accurate pa rin ba yung reporting nila? Try to imagine, Atty. Karen, and this is what I have been pleading our Congress. Na sana yung citizenry, tulungan kami dito na push. Yun nga po you are allowed only 3 pesos per registered voter. That's about 2 decades ago. Hindi na po makatotohanan. That's no longer reasonable, practical, and the reality is not, hindi naman pwedeng 3 pesos lang per registered voter.
So you're suggesting na dapat po iangat yung limit for spending?
President nga po, 10 pesos lang Pati Vice President, 10 pesos lang.
So most likely, palagay nyo po, maraming nag-violate niyan, yung limit sa spending. Hindi lang na-declare ng tama.
And yes, I will readily admit. But the COMELEC cannot do anything because we will rely solely on the documents as submitted to us. That's why, beginning 2025, we caused the publication of the SOSE of candidates in our website. For the first time yon, Atty. Karen. And later on, in the next succeeding elections, makukuha yan sa social media, including the every pieces and details, makukuha na ng mga kababayan natin. The people must be able to assist the COMELEC in determining sino ba talaga yung itong taong ito? Contractor ba siya? Nationwide, if you are receiving 44,000 SOSE for a single election.
How can you check everything as COMELEC and you're so undermanned for the work that you have?
Wala po kami, hindi namin kakilala yung lahat ng contractors ng buong Pilipinas.
So Chairman George, sa ngayon po, anong type of coordination are you doing with ICI?
In the meantime, wala pa po tayong coordination, wala pa rin naman po silang invitation sa Commission
With
election.
the Ombudsman po?
Yes, the Ombudsman is actually have written something to the Commission election asking for certain documents, more particularly the SOSE.
Okay, and finally, sorry, last question because we're out of time. Yung Supreme Court po nagkaroon na ng decision dun sa second placer rule and it changed the doctrine we had before. So pag second placer, hindi na yan ang considered na elected official. But we have proclaimed winners. Like, just an example, si Congressman Benny Abante, who was already proclaimed and now sits in Congress. Ano na po yung mangyayari dun sa mga na-proclaim na second placers?
We filed our manifestation in that case of Manguadatu versus the Commission election, which abandoned the case, as you correctly pointed out, the case of Halosos versus Commission election. Masyado pong revolutionary and earth-shaking yung pag-abandon simply because the COMELEC is not prepared at that time because kami alam namin ever since second placer can sit But biglang nagkaroon ng abandonment of the doctrine. So what is now the distinction between disqualification and cancellation of candidacy. A disqualification case can be filed anytime before the proclamation, samantalang a cancellation of candidacy can be filed only within 25 days after the filing of the candidacy. At saka yung effect, pag na-disqualify ka, you can be substituted. Pag cancellation, you cannot be substituted because as if you did not become a candidate. Why is now no distinction between disqualification and cancellation when it comes to the effect? Yun po yung problem namin. And so we're hoping that our Honorable Supreme Court will be able to issue a proper guidance.
So in short, yung mga second placer po na proclaim will just be there in the meantime habang merong kayong manifestation or inaantay sa Supreme Court.
And just in case ito po ay congressman, then a proper venue will now be the House of Representatives Electoral Tribunal under the Constitution.
Okay, thank you so much, COMELEC Chairman George Garcia.
Thank you very much, Atty. Karen.
The price of democracy is trust, and trust demands transparency. When money moves in secret and contract-shaped campaigns, the very ballot is put to the test. Until every donation is disclosed and every deal is clean, the vote and the voice of the people remain at risk. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news. Always stay at the forefront. Join us again tomorrow for conversations on issues that matter. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Thank you for spending your morning with us.